Happy New Year. Happy 2026. Welcome back to Thriving Loudly. I am your host, Aiesha Beasley.
And I am your host, Trenise Watson.
And if you are new here and you don't know anything about this podcast, Thriving Loudly is the podcast where we help you break imposter syndrome, release survival mode, and build the mindset required to actually win in life, business, and visibility.
That's right. So today we're talking about burnout. Not the cute, I need a nap. We're talking about the kind of burnout where it's like you feel like you're running on E. Like I've had enough. I think we've all been there, especially with 2025.
So if you're like us and you ended 2025 exhausted and maybe even unfulfilled, this episode we're going to dive deep into. So this might be for you.
Yes. So let's talk about burnout and what it actually truly looks like, because most of us didn't even realize, we were really in it. I don't think we realize it until you get like deep into it and you're like, wait a minute, I'm at capacity and I can't even think clearly.
Yeah. I kind of want to start this conversation with you, Trenise. Like, how was your 2025? And, now we're in the new year. It's kind of a fresh start. So how did 2025 go for you?
Oh my gosh. My 2025 was definitely life-changing. I would say that. It started off really good. We were amped about the podcast. We started off really good. We had our launch party and everything. Business was going great. I got a lot closer to my family. But on the other side of my personal side, when it came to love and my whole love life, that kind of just like was upside down. And so while I thought, it was going to be an amazing year, I was so excited for 2025. As I got deeper into it, because of that portion of my life, it kind of just like took over and kind of clouded me. And so it wasn't the best 2025 like I would have liked it to be. I struggled with a lot of things, but I had my family that was really rooting for me and was like really my tribe that were there for me every step of the way. I don't want to really get too much into it, because it's personal, but I ended 2025 as I just feel like a new person. I've gained a lot more self-respect for myself, self-love, really got hard in the gym and just really focused on me. And I just realized that there were some things that I had to cut out of my life that just no longer worked for me. And so it started off great. It got blurry, it got cloudy, but I had my tribe that was there with me every step of the way. And I feel like looking now on the other side, when it came to December and January, I just feel like such a better person. And I was able to release some things that truly just needed to just be released and be done and, close that chapter. So I know I said a lot and kind of rambled, but
no, you're good. I love that.
That's how it was. Yeah. And there was some burnout in there. There was some, it was not the best, but I made it through. How was your 2025?
Oh, my 2025, on paper, I feel like it still was a strong year for me, business-wise, as a creator. I have a very high achiever mindset. I am a high achiever. I always want to strive for the best. I always want to do as much as I can. And I did realize, and I realized this the last couple of years, that doing that at such a high level for so long, it's going to start to take a toll on you. Yeah. It just is, and just kind of realizing that I have to have boundaries. I have to kind of start thinking about myself a little bit more versus like how many opportunities I need to take and, this, that, and the third. And I think I just reached a peak at the end of the year to where I was like, okay, I got to slow down a little bit. I got to regroup. This is all great. Like I could still do all this, but is that going to be sustainable? Is that going to be good for my mental health? Is this just so many things going through my head. And I think when you're at that point of being so depleted and so burnt out, it's hard to make decisions. It's hard to be there for other people. It's hard to see your goals clearly because you're so tired and your mind is cloudy that you're just like, I don't know what to do because I am just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But can I continue to operate like this? And it's just not healthy. And I think I realized I had to start to take some steps to change that and change my mindset towards that. And I really did realize in December that I'm like, okay, I need to take 2026 and kind of really focus on myself a little bit more, still do all the fun things. I love doing all the fun things. I love being out and about. I'm a party girl. I love doing all of that.
Yeah.
But I did realize that I have to put myself first, and I have to kind of get clear with my own goals, my intentions, you know, pour back into my relationships with my friends, my family, and, you know, even my boyfriend, you know, because a lot of that was on the back burner because I'm like, I got to work, I got to edit, I got to post, I got to go here, you know, and I let work kind of control me instead of finding that time to pour back into myself and others.
And I can identify with that because I let my personal life control me for all of 2025. And I kind of like took a dip, you know, it's like I was so foggy and, you know, not clear on, like I had all these goals. I was like, it's going to be an amazing year. And it was like all that just went to the left. It's so, I guess, funny how, you know, when you're in burnout or when you are emotionally charged or you're going through something emotionally, how that can just derail you off of what you set out for yourself. And that's why I'm like, I can identify, you know, from your angle of being burnt out. For me, it was like an emotional burnout, you know, and it's like, you still can't see clearly because you're thinking about this, you're thinking about that. And it's just like, oh my God. And you still have deadlines you have to meet. You have clients, you know, you still have to, like you said, you know, talk to your family and everything. And so it can be a lot. Yeah.
It's hard. And
it is.
And how did like survivor mode show up in your daily decisions? Because I feel like when you're emotionally burnt out or you're burnt out from work, how do you, I feel like I couldn't even make a decision. I was like, I don't know. Like I just even answering simple questions about just business and work and, you know, talking to my talent manager, I'm like, I can't deal. How is there a way you kind of push past that? And
I mean, there was days where I just had to like just take a 5 minute, or maybe I had to take an hour and just kind of like step away. There was days I had to work in bed.
Yeah.
You know, I had to make it work. Maybe I had to call my mom, like, hey mom, you know, I'm having a moment right now. Like, I just need you to talk me through this. Like I don't want to cry, but I'm like, it really got to that point where it was very difficult. When you say cloudy, like cloudy, you know, and I had never ever in my life honestly been in a space like that where I was just like, how am I gonna continue? You know, like my business, everything is so dependent on me, and I'm so clouded with emotions that I can't even think straight, you know. So my family, my friends, first of all, I just thank you guys because they really rallied around me because they were like, Trenise, this is not you. You know, you're off. What's going on with you? And through me talking and really expressing myself and just allowing myself to go through the motions, that's how I was able to get through survivor, mode. And then also, like I had talked about in season 1, going back to a schedule. That's why I like to be on a schedule. That's why I like to have systems in place, because for days when you are feeling cloudy and you feel like you don't know if you're going left or right, when you're on a schedule, at least you could, you know, do the bare minimum, but still get through because you have a schedule set up, versus if you don't have a schedule, then you're going to the left, the right, you know, in every way which. So that's how I got through it.
Yeah, I really like that point. And what do you feel like you're doing differently in 2026 versus 2025? What are some changes you're starting to implement, or the goals you're starting to implement this year?
Well, I definitely got a lot clearer because I released that situation. So once I released that situation, it was like a cloud, literally like a cloud. That's how you know when you're not in alignment with yourself, because it was like, as soon as I released that, all the fog went away. And I got clear and I sat down, I meditated, and I was like, okay, this is what I'm doing. So I set goals for 2026 of, you know, this is what I'm focused on. And I got back to my morning routine. I mean, I kind of fell off of that, got back to that, and just really have put my head down and, you know, started working on some things that I need to do for 2026. But it was just really honestly the release of that, letting it go, letting it be, you know, and moving forward.
Yeah.
Setting goals and intentions, you know, for the new year and just doing it. Yeah. How about you?
Oh, yeah, I can agree with that. I think one of the biggest things and changes I am implementing for this year is kind of getting sober. I kind of take, a few months here and there to, not drink and, kind of have that reset. So I am like in the midst of dry January. So I'm doing that. And, also just a lot of the bad habits that I have, personally, with the alcohol, I never really had a problem with it. I think being in the industry, going to events, it's always there, right?
Yeah.
And, even though you're like, I'm not an at-home drinker where I'm like down in a bottle of wine, but you're going to events several days a week. You have two drinks there.
Yeah.
I go to a restaurant that I'm reviewing. I have another 2 drinks there. I'm having 1 drink the next day at this event. And it piles up. And then you're like, it gets to the end of the week and you're like, dang, I had 8 drinks this week, and, there is, obviously, scientific studies that back up that, no amount of alcohol is good for you. And when you're in a place of survival mode and you're already anxious, you're stressed, you can't sleep, alcohol being in the picture, I feel like was kind of elevating that anxiety a little bit and brain fog and cloudiness. Yeah. So for me, getting sober, at least for this month or whoever, or how, I don't even know how long, I think is important for me to cut back on my consumption with that. And then also my consumption with cannabis and THC. For me, again, like I'll take a gummy before bed to like try to relax. Right. And, there's a lot of studies now, showing that, cannabis use, it's not, the THC levels in cannabis aren't the same as they were in the 70s and the 90s, 70s to the 90s. It's a higher percentage. And with that being said, it can affect your brain, right? It can affect how you show up, the brain fog again. Yeah. So I would wake up, take a 10 milligram gummy for bed, just to calm down and relax. And then I'm waking up just so tired and so unmotivated and, mixing, the cannabis and the alcohol and, the doom scrolling, even though doing the research is part of my job, but I'm mixing all these bad habits I had, no routines. And I think it just was an elevation of not being able to show up in my business the way I should have. And so I kind of made it a point, coming into this year to be like, I need to get sober a little bit. I need to not be relying on, taking a gummy before bed or smoking a joint or whatever it is to relax. I need to have a clear head if I want to be optimal in my business and in my life. Also continue to stay focused with my workout routines and being dialed in with that, because if you're stressed and you're going through all these, problems, exercise is good for you. It helps.
It is.
It helps relieve stress. And, that's something that over the last few years, I was kind of self-sabotaging because, I was putting my business before my health. And it's so easy to, in the kind of food, restaurant, and hospitality industry to kind of get wrapped up in the events and the food and all the fun things, which they're so fun. Don't get me wrong. I love it. But, again, it's, your health, right? Yeah. And so I think for me, it's been really diving into my health, cutting back on the alcohol and all the things to really start to gain some clarity in my life. And I've realized over the last few weeks, it's been a little bit better, still trying to work on the sleep and all the things, but, I'm going in the right direction for sure.
I can definitely identify with that. That's actually one of the things I cut out too was alcohol. I don't smoke, but I cut down on alcohol because I felt like for me, that was what was causing the cloudiness. And once I like really cut back, I'm kind of doing dry January. It's like once a week that I'm still having like a glass of wine, but I've cut it down drastically than, what I was consuming before. And I've noticed a huge difference. But it's just when you are already stressed, when you're cloudy, it's not good for you at all, because it's just adding to it. And if you are already emotional too, it just makes it worse. And that's what I realized. I was like, you know what? This is not really helping me. This is not calming me down.
Yeah.
This is making me spiral.
Yeah.
This is now I'm, drinking some wine, and now I'm thinking, all of these intrusive thoughts and, all the things. And I'm like, this is not helping me. And so that was what I had to do, was like, you know what? I'm going to cut down on this and eventually just cut it off for now and really just get back focused on Trenise and what Trenise needs to do for her business, personal life and everything. So I would say I've done that too. And then also working out has really changed my life, like 100%. And even I feel like bringing clarity, because sometimes like this morning when I woke up, I didn't really feel good. I was tired, but once I worked out, I felt a lot clearer. I felt better. And so I've realized like health and wellness, I have to get back to, that. I have to get back into fitness, because when I'm working out, I just feel so much better and so much clearer and freer.
I love that. And just so you guys know, Sober Curious is no longer a trend anymore. When we are talking about what is happening in, this generation, there's surveys that show that young adults' interest in drinking alcohol is declining, especially among Gen Z, often for health and wellness reasons. So this isn't anything new. A lot of people are exploring this, and a major 2025 study from BMG Evidence-Based Medicine concluded that even light alcohol consumption increases dementia risk in adults, challenging past ideas that moderate drinking can be good. So, we are seeing this trend, and, I do notice that, this is on the decline, even with, my friends and, my peers, and just feeling good the next day and being able to get your work done, not be hungover, not have all this brain fog, is good. And now they're saying many Gen Z individuals identify as sober curious, and they're choosing non-alcoholic alternatives or are cutting back from mental and physical health benefits, just like you and I are. So, we are more millennials, but even, my millennial peers are also kind of cutting back on the alcohol consumption.
And I think because we're millennials, I've been seeing a lot of that on social media. They were saying like millennials are like alcoholics, or, we drank a lot, kind of growing up, even as teenagers in our early 20s and things like that. And so we have a different outlook on alcohol than, Gen Z does, because the times were different growing up.
Oh, yeah.
And so I definitely see that. What clarity do you feel like you've gained so far with now, changing some habits in 2026?
I think for me, I'm starting to get a little bit more clear-headed. I can't really say I'm fully like, everything's great, but I feel like, I'm starting to have a little bit more of a routine. I get up, I make my bed, I wasn't making my bed before. I was like, screw it, just get out of bed. Yeah. I'm waking up earlier. Before, I've never really been a morning person. Even when I had my 9 to 5, I hated getting up and going to my visual merchandising job where I had to be there at like 6 a.m. I was like, oh my gosh. So anytime I could sleep in till 10 a.m. or later, I would do it. So now I'm waking up earlier, like, sometimes like 6 a.m., 7 a.m. And I'm kind of getting my day started. I started, I'm starting to read more. I'm starting to journal more. And, just thinking about things that actually need to get done. Yeah. I'm not procrastinating as much because now I have a little bit more clarity on like, okay, this task has to get done. Yeah. I'm prioritizing like getting my laundry done. I'm not like letting it pile up. Just little things I would let slide. And I feel like, with, using cannabis and stuff like that, I kind of felt very, very unmotivated to do just the little things that needed to get done.
Yeah.
So I'm slowly kind of recovering, from just the heavy usage, because there are a lot of, negative side effects for just using, cannabis like heavily, like I was, it's just it's not good for you. Like, even though it's like maybe better than alcohol, per se.
But is it really,
Is it really? I don't know. I think there's a lot of stuff now coming out about, cannabis use and the research, especially with your cognitive brain and the effects. Research shows that long-term or heavy cannabis use can affect working memory and cognitive processing, particularly in adults 22 to 36, where heavy users showed reduced brain activity on memory tasks. And, there's a lot of studies showing how it affects your dopamine and motivation, Obviously, these are more long-term effects, but it's still like, who wants to be, in their 50s forgetting everything or have like early signs of
dementia?
Yeah. Which is possible. And so I'm realizing all of that. I'm like, I don't want to be in my 50s, like declining, and some of those things like alcohol, taking an edible here and there, like can be fun. But like when you're just like using it as an escape, like I was, because I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so stressed. It's end of the day. Let me pop a gummy. That's just not good. So
yeah. Growing up as a teenager, I dabbled in a little bit of marijuana. I actually stopped smoking when I was 22. I have not smoked ever since, but that was the reason why I quit. I was like, this is not me. I think I smoked from like 17 to 22. And I was just like, this is not me. I felt cloudy, I felt unmotivated. I was depressed, and as soon as I stopped smoking, I felt a lot better. And I told myself, I said, I would never do that ever again. Yeah. Because it doesn't fit my personality. I'm more of an upbeat person, and if I was to smoke, it would just bring me down. It would really make me just be mellowed out. Like, what's wrong with Trenise? She's here, but she's not here. And so I was like, this is not for me. I definitely understand that. Yeah. So let's see. How did hustle culture shape how you measured success? So like kind of going back to like just hustling. So what does that mean to you? Like, when it comes to success, because I know you said that you're like a go-getter and you know all about your goals and stuff like that. I have a very high achiever mindset. I feel like for me, it's more the hustle culture for me was like, the more I can output, the more opportunities that will come, and the more money I could potentially make, the more I can grow. And to an extent, that is all true, right? The more you work, the harder you work, the more you're going to get out of it. And so for me, I really measured my success on output. I was like, if I can post more, sometimes twice a day, I can put out more content, I'll have more opportunities and I can continue to grow. But what I realized with being immersed in this hustle culture, sometimes quality goes down a little bit. Sometimes you're just putting out stuff just to put out stuff. And I think I was questioning, okay, like, yes, I like this, but could I have spent a little bit more time on this and made it better? Like maybe had a better opinion. And I think I started to get a little unhappy with my work because I was just worried about the output, no matter what it was. And I think for myself, I had to really take a step back and be like, am I super excited and proud of the content I'm putting out? And everything I've put out, I've enjoyed, I've liked, but sometimes you're just like, I probably could have done this a little bit better. I could have maybe been more intentional about this. And just because you're outputting doesn't mean it's always the best work. But sometimes it doesn't have to be cinematic and all these like bells and whistles. But I think I started disconnecting with myself a lot more. Because I was just trying to output, and I wasn't really honoring like the Aiesha maybe touch to it, the Aiesha flair. Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
What about you? Are you, because I feel like you're a little bit different. You're very, at least as long as I've known you, you've been more so like, I have my routines, I'm grounded, I'm doing all these things. And I feel like even when we talked about this last season, you're kind of had your kind of routines going.
Yeah.
Are you immersed in any type of hustle culture? Were you ever last year?
Yeah, well, I think the thing for me is I feel like I've been hustling for so long. I've been a go-getter for so long. Like I've always been that person that rised above the ranks. Every job I had, I got promoted. Like I've always been so heavy and just hustling, high achieving. I got to a point where I got burnt out. And so that's why you see me now like balanced and like I have to have a routine and all the things, because I was going at it so hard that I had no other choice but to really have a routine. But then also being in those different roles that I was in, it forced me to have a routine. So that's why I'm so dialed in the way that I am. And even, being 34, because some people are like, wow, you seem like you really have it together. But I'm like, but you guys don't know my path. I did a lot of things when I was young, early 20s. I've just done a lot of things that have made me into the person that I am today. And so if I don't have a routine, if I don't have some type of system set up, Trenise cannot function. So when it comes to hustle culture, I've just learned to slow down. I've really embraced the 80% rule. As long as it's 80% good, that's good enough. Like it does not have to be at 100%. You do not have to be a perfectionist, because I'm a natural perfectionist. And if I could have everything perfect to the T, trust me, I would. But that's not reality, And so once I've started embracing the 80% rule, where it's like, as long as it's 80% good, you're fine. Don't stress out about it, because nothing is ever going to be perfect. You know what I mean? That's that's always in the back of my head. And I had to learn that early on. And I think that's what saved me a lot from just having just hustle so much and, do all these things, because I'm like, well, I'm still meeting the mark. As long as I'm meeting the mark, I'm good, Yeah. And I know that kind of maybe sounds bad to say, but you have to come up with some type of framework in order to be able to do different things and be able to excel. Because if you put 100% into every single thing, there's no way that you will ever get anything done.
That's so true.
So it's like it has to be some type of balance there.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, sometimes you have to kind of be like, okay, this isn't perfect, but it is good enough.
But it's good enough.
It's good enough.
Yeah.
If you hyperfixate on every little thing, it's like you'll never get much done, right? Sometimes you just have to be like, okay, this is good. Could there be some room for improvement? But am I going to hyperfixate this until it's like perfect? I don't have time for that.
I don't have time for that. Yeah. You could be doing something else, It's like,
I agree with that. I know we've talked a little bit behind the scenes on, being a people pleaser and how that kind of works with, saying yes to stuff and, saying yes out of like obligation or, from alignment. How has that like shaped you to where you're at now, considering you've done, over the last few years, a lot of, inner work on yourself to get to a place to where, okay, I feel a little bit balanced. I know my routines. I know what to, I know my wants. I know my needs. Like how did you get to that point?
It came down to boundaries. Kind of going back to being burnt out, always saying yes to everything, wanting to please people, right? But I think people pleasing comes from not being truly confident in yourself, not wanting to let people down, pretty much letting other people run your life. And it comes to a point where you are just so depleted, you're not filling up your own cup, that you have to step back and set boundaries and say, this is not going to work. I have to put myself first. I cannot continue to people please, because this is not healthy for me. If I'm always saying yes to everybody and giving everybody else what they want, well, where's Trenise in that equation? And that's where the boundaries come into play. It's like, that's why, going back to, I like to be on a 9-to-5 schedule. I like to work Monday through Friday. Sometimes I do work on the weekends, but I try to really hold myself to that and only be available between 9 to 5, because if I'm working outside of that, it can throw me off into the plans that I have for myself. Now, where's Trenise if Trenise is working 7 days a week? if I'm doing something for everybody else? You know, if I'm doing client work on Saturday and Sunday, well, then where am I at? You know? And so that's where it goes back to having those boundaries. You know, some people may say, well, that's a little extreme, or, you know, you should be a little bit more flexible. But I think there comes to a point where it's like, you have to look at putting yourself first. It's not about everybody else. And that's where I'm at. And so that's been working for me. And that's pretty much how I stay balanced, and just learning how to say no more often. I don't always get it right. You know, I still sometimes people please just because I like to make people happy too, by saying, yeah, sure. Yeah. But I'm learning more and more. I cannot do that because it's just not healthy at all. Mm-hmm. How about yourself?
Yeah, I think in 2026, one of my goals is to kind of break that people pleasing. And I think for myself, I love helping as many people as I can. You know, I built my platforms, you know, supporting, you know, small businesses and local businesses. But I've realized I'm only one person. If there was 10 of me, I would probably be everywhere. Yeah. Reviewing every restaurant, every place, pumping out the videos, but that's impossible. And I think over the last couple of years, I did lose myself with that a little bit, saying like, okay, I can do this, I can do that. And then I'm overloading my calendar so much that I've had to cancel and be like, I can't come in to film today because I'm
just tired.
I'm tired. I can't do it. You know what I'm saying? And I realize, you know, I've had said yes out of obligation instead of asking myself, is this aligned for me? Am I super excited about this? Is this something I haven't, you know, shared with my audience before? You know, is this something that is going to elevate my career? You know, is this event going to put me in rooms, and, you know, am I going to gain different connections that I haven't gained before? And I've started to ask myself these questions, like, is this also benefiting me if I say yes to it? Not just to say yes because I'm like, oh, I just want to help them, which is still a valid reason. You know, you want to help and support, but there comes a point where it's impossible, because then, like you were mentioning, the working weekends, working 7 days a week, where is there time for me to get stuff done for me? Where is there time for me to work out? Go to the grocery store, do laundry, like take care of my own personal needs. And I really have realized that there has been little to no room for that. And then I'm looking at my house, like my closet, like, oh my gosh, I haven't cleaned in weeks, and there's this, there's that, like this is piled up. I need to take care of this. And I'm like, so overwhelmed, not only from just the filming and just going out and doing all those things. My entire apartment is a mess. I'm a mess. I'm stressed. And I'm like, what do I do?
This is too much.
This is too much. I'm checked out here. And so it came to that point too last year where I was like, I gotta get the calendar under control. You know, I can't just say yes to everything. And, you know, I'm very thankful and grateful I'm in a point where people want me in those rooms. And I've built a platform where I'm in demand. That's a blessing, you know, but I still have to find room for myself. And so in 2026, it's about creating those boundaries for myself that I didn't once have, because I still need to pour into my own cup and figure out what sets me on fire as well. Outside of just, you know, the fun things I do, you know, what other hobbies, you know, because I think my brain runs on social media 24/7, that I'm like, what's my life outside of this? I don't have a life outside of this. I'm trying to find that life. You know, I hope to find that life this year. And so I love the whole social media life, but I'm like, I need to have some other hobbies to decompress and enjoy. I don't know whether it's going to be sewing or ballet or taking a different dance class. I don't know what that looks like for me, but I haven't given myself the space and the time to explore that.
I definitely can agree with that. Actually, I'm going to start taking up dancing. That's one of my new hobbies that I was like, because I really enjoy dancing. I love that. Like you said, you know, when you can't even think straight, you're not even thinking about dancing. You're not even thinking about a hobby, you know. But I was like, this year, I'm really going to get into dancing. Actually, is it diva dance?
Okay. Let me know how that is, girl. Let me know, because I'm interested in trying to look for some new fun little things to, try out myself. So
I definitely will, or maybe we should go one day.
Yeah,
but
we
yes,
should.
that's one of the things that I'm looking into, and I'm looking forward to kind of getting back into that.
I love that. That's amazing. Yeah, I think it's important to have hobbies, and
I agree.
to have other outlets outside of your work and your job. I think that's super important.
I agree. What's one thing that you feel like 2025 has just taught you in general, like kind of going back to burnout and, just hustle culture and all that? I guess what's one takeaway?
I would say my one takeaway is that I can no longer pour from an empty cup. If I am not whole, if I'm not full, if I'm not fulfilled, it's hard for me to give back to others and support others and be there for others. And I think that has been a struggle with my personal relationships with friends and family, and I kind of feel bad because I have friends checking in on me and I'm just like, I'm alive, but I just can't, I can't give you anything right now. And like, I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to be in that position with my family too. And I think it's taught me, to work on the inner, I've built this outer world that's amazing, so grateful for it, but I need to focus on the inner world myself, because, again, you don't want to be so depleted to where you're resentful and you're not a fun person to be around, because people are like, dang, she's always mean and sour, I was like, I need to work on myself. And so that's what my big takeaway from last year is.
I think one of my biggest takeaways was just being more surrounded by family and friends. Like I said, my tribe really just came through for me last year, and I didn't really realize how much support I had. But I was able to pour more into them just because of, some of the things that I was going into. And I just had to stop for a second. I was like, wow, I actually have a lot of people that care about me. Like, I have a lot of people that really love me and is here for me. I mean, like, even some of my cousins I hadn't talked to in forever, just rebuilding those relationships. And now they're checking in on me. I hadn't heard from them, in years. And it's like, when you really do pour into people and you build those relationships, kind of like what you're talking about, but on the other side, you really do realize like, wow, I do have support. Wow. Like I do, people do care about me. And so I think that was the takeaway for me was to put time aside to build those relationships with your family and your friends, not just mom and dad, mom, dad, sister, cousin, this friend, that friend, even, associates and things like that. And the more you pour into people, the more that they pour into you. And that's what really got me through 2025, but now also in 2026. And, more people are calling me because I've taken the time to, kind of get back reconnected with them. And it's been great.
I love that, because I think it's so easy when you're an entrepreneur to isolate yourself and just be solely locked in on your business. I feel like I've been guilty of that as well, because you're just so laser focused. But it is important to have your tribe and those people to lean on when you're in a bind, when you're going through stuff. You can talk to someone, you can lean on them, and that has been important even for myself. When friends have checked in on me over the last month or so, and just saying, oh, how are you doing? I'm noticing this. And, it's good to have those people in your circle. Cause it's very easy just to be isolated.
It is. And sometimes you don't want to tell people what you're going through.
Yeah.
And then when you do tell them, it's like, okay, like I said, like you do have people that's here to support you, and now they're sending you messages. Are you okay? You need to talk. And it's like, wow, had I wouldn't have said anything and stayed in my bubble, I wouldn't have even known that I had this support.
Yeah, because we're not the only ones that go through stuff, and people can relate, and also life is short. It's important to pour into those friendships and family relationships, because you just never know, and it's important to have that.
It is. Yeah, I agree. Do you feel like as being a woman of color is one of the reasons why you've always been like a high achiever? Do you feel like you have to overperform because you're a woman of color?
I would say out here, yes, because there aren't a lot of women in my niche who are at the level I'm at. So I feel like there's almost this pressure to be like, to continue to pave paved the way, right? You know, when I started, there really wasn't, you know, Black women, you know, doing the lifestyle, the fashion content, the food content that I was doing back a few years ago. And so, you know, I get DMs and emails all the time from girls, you know, who tell me, they're like, you know, you're the reason why I started doing this, doing my Arizona food content, you know, putting myself out there on social media. And I feel like I did internalize that a lot, and it kind of put more pressure on me to continue breaking those doors down, because there was a time when I was the only woman of color in the room. We're not even talking not just Black women, but like woman of color in the room, where, you know, there wasn't anyone who was remotely close to me. It was just blonde hair, blue eyes, you know, just the same, you know, same aesthetic. And, you know, it did put more pressure on me, and I still feel that way a little bit today. But I have, you know, realized that, you know, it's okay to slow down and take breaks. We all need breaks. We all need time to recalibrate and reset. And just because I've pulled back just slightly doesn't mean that it's not going to continue to open up doors for other women and other people. And, you know, and I do feel like there's, you know, moments, or there's been moments in my, you know, creator career where I felt like I did have to prove way more than others. Where it just seemed easy for them, where I was like, I had to reach 50, 60, 70K before I had an invitation in the conversation, especially back then. That's really what it was, when there was, you know, smaller creators who weren't barely breaking 10K, who were getting these extravagant invites to these restaurant events, and I had to be at a higher level to get to that point. So there were those times, but you know, I realized, you know, things have changed, things have shifted out here a lot, and, you know, specifically in Arizona, and I feel good. I feel good about the direction.
Well, that's good. I feel like I had to overcompensate as a woman of color as well. And that's why I became a high achiever, because, you know, you feel like you have to do all these things, right? You have to get all this education. You have to be the best at your job. You have to do all these things just to be in the room. But again, it goes back to the burnout, you know, where it's like, you do all of that, you know, you strive so much, you're working so hard, you know, and it's like, it gets to a point where it's like, okay, enough is enough. Like, I have to be secure within myself and say, hey, you know, I'm good where I'm at. You know, I could still compete, you know, in the rooms, and still have an opportunity as well where I don't have to overcompensate for, you know, my skin color. And I think that's where I'm at now, is I'm finally just comfortable with myself. And I think that's why I'm able to be kind of laid back too. And I'm like, I don't really care what you think about me. You know, like, I'm still going to show up, even if I'm the only one that looks like me in the room. You know, I'm from Wisconsin, so I'm used to this, you know, and I think that that's also been a positive for me too, is growing up in a predominantly white state. So I'm used to being around, you know, people that don't look like me, you know, and I know how to navigate in those type of rooms. But for sure, in my early days, I definitely had to overcompensate. But I feel like you get to an age, and you get to a level where it's like, I don't even care anymore. I'm still going to show up as me, and whether you like it or not.
I love that.
You know?
I love that.
So we're gonna wrap it up. We're going to leave with, what are 3 boundaries that you feel like you're implementing in 2026?
3 boundaries. I would say boundary number 1 for myself is I'm no longer going to people please. I'm also going to honor my own routines, and, you know, making sure I'm good first, right? You know, having that routine, I think, is super important. And 3 is just learning to rest, because I find myself sometimes working until like 10 p.m., midnight. I need a rest. And I think having a consistent sleep schedule too is important. So I've also been trying to be better with that, which has been great over the last few weeks. What about you?
For sure, not people pleasing anymore. I'm really like trying to stop that, like 80%. I'm not going to say 100% because, there still may be that gray area. But learning to say no and sticking to no as well, which kind of goes with the people pleasing. But, when I say no or when I'm not available or I need to just say no and be done with that. And I think just putting myself first, just honoring me. I've just spent too much time just trying to please other people and, just caring too much what people think. So it's my time. This year is about Trenise.
I love that. I love that.
All right. So we are going to wrap it up.
Okay, guys. So we want you to take some action in your own life. So pause this episode and write down 3 things you want to leave behind from 2025 and 3 boundaries you're implementing this year in 2026.
And so as usual, we're going to close with a couple of affirmations actually today. I release survival mode. I choose clarity over chaos, and I move at a pace that supports my life. All right.
All right. Thank you guys again for watching this episode. And you can follow us over on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Thriving Loudly. And we will see you in the next episode.
Bye,
guys.